So we know it's really, really serious, and particularly in our major cities like Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, which are experiencing significant population growth. And we know when you have more people living in cities, you have more people dying in cities and more people needing to be disposed of in cities. And so some of our major cities are going to be running out of burial space within the next decade to a generation.
What is renewable tenure, and is it available in Australia?
So renewable tenure is the idea that when you purchase the right to inter a body in a particular burial plot, that body will only stay there for a particular period of time. And after that period of time is up, the grave becomes available for reuse. So that period of time might be anywhere from 25 years, which is the system out in Western Australia, up to something like 99 years, which states like Victoria have in place for things like cremated ashes, when cremated ashes are interred. So if we go to WA, which has this 25-year period, a body will be put in the ground, it'll stay there for 25 years. The family will then have the option to purchase an additional 25-year tenure on that grave. And at the end of the 50-year period, that grave becomes available for a subsequent interment in that spot.
What happens overseas? Are they more comfortable with things like renewable tenure?
Yeah, so overseas, particularly in places like Europe and Eastern Asia, renewable tenure really is the norm when you're looking at countries which have much smaller land available, amounts of land available for cemeteries and a much longer history, I guess, of the use of cemeteries. Renewable tenure really is the norm. And so the perpetual tenure system that a lot of Australian jurisdictions have in place is actually a bit of an anomaly. So we really are outliers.
Do we need to encourage more cremation in Australia?
So we know that cremation rates are sitting at about 2/3, so kind of in the 60% range of people are actually already cremated. Certainly looking at increasing cremation rates is one way of reducing the demand on cemetery space. But we should also be thinking about other alternative disposal mechanisms, so things like water cremation, sometimes called alkaline hydrolysis, which is in place in New South Wales, for example, and then things like human composting, which are really at the cutting edge of body disposal, and thinking about how we can bring those systems into Australia and give people more choice in the body disposal context, and then hopefully by doing so reduce the demand on cemeteries.
How do you get people on board for some of those alternatives which may seem unpalatable to people who have loved ones who have just died or who are dying?
Of course, yeah. Certainly something like water cremation, if you refer to it as alkaline hydrolysis, we are functionally talking about dissolving a body in acid, basically. And that can be quite hard for people to kind of get on board with. But it really is about giving people options. And we know that these new disposal mechanisms are much more environmentally friendly. So they tend to appeal to people who have strong environmentalist kind of ideas about what they want to happen to their body when they die. So we know a lot of people choose cremation because it is seen as more environmentally friendly, but cremation is actually not perfect in terms of its environmental credentials. So giving new alternative disposal mechanisms does enable people to really have, I guess, more simpler and more environmentally friendly body disposal options available to them.
And you've also talked about making cemeteries public green spaces. What are those? What would it look like?
Yeah, so if we think about, a big public park or something, so places where people can go to enjoy being in a green space, which we know is becoming increasingly rare, particularly in our urban centres. There's a shortage of green space. So if we can, reimagine what a cemetery might look like and how we use that cemetery space to invite people to come in and really bridge that gap between the living and the dead, to make a cemetery a space for the living as well as for the dead. And this can help people, get over the initial reluctance that might come about with having a cemetery in your backyard, right? Not everyone wants to live near a cemetery, but if we can reimagine how we think about cemeteries and think of them as more spaces for the living as well as for the dead, then we might see people more willing to have new cemeteries constructed in their neighbourhoods.